Did you know NATO just told Canada they need to prepare for war? But the country is broke, inflation is killing the middle class, and the real estate market is collapsing. Let's break it down. Before I go into Canada, supposedly, Zelensky's ready to sign minerals over again. That's all I'm going to say because how many times have we gone down that pathway and he doesn't sign? All right, so NATO just put Canada on notice. It's time to get ready for war. Here's the issue. Canada has been underfunding its military for decades. NATO requires each member to spend at least 2% of its GDP on defense. Guess what? Canada isn't even close. In 2024, they spent a 1.3% of GDP on defense, one of the lowest of any NATO members. Countries like Poland, Estonia, and even Germany have upped their military budgets. But Canada, they've ignored their NATO obligations for years, probably because they have us right below them. Now NATO is saying Canada needs to step it up. But here's the real question. Can Canada even afford it? Because right now the country's in financial freefall. Is Canada financially collapsing, yet offering to send billions to Ukraine? Military that they don't even have weapons? I don't know. Declining living standards. Canada is seeing the worst decline in living standards in 40 years. Per capita GDP dropped by 3.4% between 2020 and late 2023. This means the average Canadian is making less money, getting poorer, and struggling to keep up with the rising cost of living. Government debt is exploding. Canada's national debt is now 1.52 trillion US dollars. That's 69.4, almost 70% of the GDP, up from 66.9 just last year. And the government just ran a $22.7 billion deficit in the first 8 months of 2024, up from just 3.58 billion last year. Translation, Canada is spending way more than it brings in. Political instability hurting the economy. And let's not forget, Justin Trudeau just resigned. This delayed business decisions, slowed hiring, killed investments because no one knows what direction the country is heading in. With no clear leadership and a failing economy, how is Canada supposed to ramp up military spending? Canadians are struggling to survive. Go spend a little bit of time on Canadian TikTok and you'll hear them all complaining about the cost of living and the cost of food, and they're not making enough money working 2 to 3 jobs. Sound familiar? Inflation is killing the middle class. Grocery prices are breaking records. A dozen of eggs, $8 or more in some places. Rent and mortgages are unaffordable. In major cities like Toronto and Vancouver, the average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment is over $2,500 a month. Energy costs are through the roof, but they want to turn off energy here in the United States. Heating your home in the winter has never been more expensive. Again, real estate is collapsing. Homeowners who bought at the peak prices are now underwater, meaning they owe more than their homes are worth. Monthly mortgage payments have doubled for some people due to high interest rates. First-time buyers, they've been priced completely out of the market unless they want to take on crippling debt. Consumer debt is skyrocketing in Canada. The average Canadian household is drowning in debt. Credit card usage is up. Savings are gone and people are living paycheck to paycheck. A recent report shows that almost half of all Canadians are $200 away from not being able to pay their bills. So let me ask you again, does this sound like a country that can afford to ramp up its military spending because NATO says it has to? The Canadians can barely get by. Canada's trade war with the US is making it even worse. And just when you thought things couldn't get worse, Canada walked into a trade war with their neighbor down south. Trump just hit Canada with 25% tariffs on imports. Canadians responded by slapping a 25% tariff back on US goods. And here's the catch. Trump already warned if Canada retaliates, he'll double it to 50%. Here's why this is a disaster for Canada. Canada sends 75% of its exports to the US. The US only sends 18% of its exports to Canada. That means Canada relies on US trade way more than the US relies on Canada. So if the trade war escalates, it's Canada that suffers the more. If we break this down to the size of the countries per GDP, it's closer to 2% of product that we export to Canada. It's not a lot. Who's it going to really hurt? They're lying on the media, of course. They're lying. What happens next? Canadian factories, farms, and businesses start losing revenue. We've already heard there's Canadian companies moving their whole operation to America to avoid the tariffs. Mass layoffs follow as businesses struggle with fewer exports. Prices rise even higher as tariffs get passed on to consumers. So tell me again, how is Canada supposed to fund its military backup when its economy is sinking fast? Is NATO pushing Canada into something it can't handle? Here's where it gets serious, because this isn't just about numbers anymore. If NATO wants Canada to prepare for war, they'll need to increase military spending dramatically. But the money isn't there. The Canadian government is already running on massive deficits. And with the trade war making it even worse, how are they going to fund this? They're going to become the 51st state. This puts Canada in an impossible situation. They didn't invest in defense when times were good. They can't afford it now that the economy is collapsing. And if NATO keeps pushing them, Canada could be forced into something it simply can't afford or handle. The question is, will Canada finally meet NATO's demands, or are they about to hit the breaking point? Do you think Canada is about to collapse under the pressure? Can they afford to go to war? Or is it all just a bluff? Drop your thoughts below. Yeah, I put a big script together and I try to stay on script, so I read my own script. It's like a teleprompter, just like the media does. Go ahead, type it in the comments. He's reading. I'm 100% reading.